Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another animation analysis video. I feel like it's been forever since we've done an animation analysis video on the channel. I believe it was like 2 weeks ago, at least I looked at, that's when the YouTube upload says was for Gohan, for the animation analysis video for Trunks, whichever the one came out afterward. I think it was Trunks. But today, we're going to be taking a look at the brand new STR-LR Cell Max animations. That is right. This was kind of a crazy release, I'm not gonna lie. Obviously, we are in the middle of the Super Bosses campaign on JP with Fizz Rose, who was originally a global first, coming out to the JP version. And we, of course, got the teaser the other night from Dokkan of the little bit of the water flowing out of the pool. And people thought it was going to be Cell Max, and it ended up being him. Now, it's so funny, man. Like, why they decided to do it this way. By the way, this is the teaser, just in case you're curious. Oh, hello, Toon Rami. Why they decided to do it this way, right? Having Cell Max come out now rather than, like, you know, with Gohan Beast, I'm not really sure, but I am really excited to take a look at these animations. Now, there may actually be a decent reason why as to they didn't do Cell Max for Anniversary, besides the fact that for most people, I think the Gammas are probably more hype, even though it technically makes less sense because it's not the enemy that Gohan Beast fights. But regardless, let's go ahead and get into it. As per usual, we're going to watch the animations one time through, and then we will go through and analyze. By the way, we do have a couple things up here. We do have Jihad's upload of the Dokkan versus anime version of these animations, so shout out to the boy. Link to this in the description, of course. And I'm also going to keep these up and handy because this will be important for when we get to this point in the video, the old boss Cell Max animations. So let's go ahead and watch. First of all, the first thing that you're going to notice is that some of the shots from the 12 key in the intro will look very similar. It's really interesting because what they've done here is they've taken the animations from the boss card, which funny enough, we actually did a video on that when the animations for this guy came out, and they actually improved upon them a lot. It's pretty clear to see that some of them are still the same animations, but a lot of them have so much more polish. There's a lot of additional things that are a part of them, and I think that that's really cool, right? For them basically just reusing animations, I'm glad what they did was not just quite literally reuse them, right? And just have it be the exact same animations, because that would have really stunk. I'm really glad that if they were going to reuse them, they actually took them, gave them a little bit more polish, made them a little bit more movie accurate, made them look a little bit more modern, and definitely cooked with them. So I think that is pretty cool. And that aspect of this does make me wonder if that's why they decided not to make this guy a anniversary character, because if a character with, you know, literally half of their animations, because this guy has intro, 12 key, 18 key, and active skill, if a character with half their animations being reused was an anniversary character, which I know there's some semantics because technically there's some stuff in the anniversary unit, so you could consider that, but, you know, this is a lot more like clear cut and dry of a case of reusing animations, right? So it makes me wonder if that's why they decided not to do it this way. But then in the same regard, why would they not just make more original animations in that case? I'm not really sure. By the way, definitely very, very much so, I love the active skill. I know a lot of people were really hoping that they were going to nail the effects on the ball. And, oh, baby, I think that they definitely did. Hydrate or dihydrate, by the way. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now, here's what we're going to do. We are going to first take a look at the funny pool. But then also, what we're going to do first is we're going to take a look at the intro. And then we will do the anime versus Dokkan comparison. And then after that is when we will watch through the intro for this. So we'll go animation by animation. And then obviously when we get to the 18 key and the active skill, we'll only have the Dokkan versus anime to do. So, starting us off, we have the shot of basically the console screen, right, with the colors that are going to be pumping into Cell Max to basically give him the green and red color, which is cool because the original animation didn't even have this shot whatsoever. So it's a nice little addition, and they definitely could have just started here with the color being pumped into him, so I'm glad that they decided to give him a little bit of extra. That's really cool. Obviously, the colors are going down because it's going into him, right? And then, of course, we have this awesome shot of him in the water, his eyes lighting up, and the color coming into screen. One thing that I do love about this detail, by the way, is the fact that if you look at the gray spots where he's not colored in all the way, right? It's not supposed to be the water that's kind of like, you know, washing around him. It's supposed to be the fact that, you know, those areas of his body aren't painted yet, and the paint is basically like overtaking him. And as the animation plays, you can see that the colors get colored in a little bit more, even besides just like all of the, you know, paint colors that are now filling up the tank, right? Like even if we look here, you can see that the spots are a lot smaller. So that is a really cool attention to detail. I definitely really like that. Definitely very, very good handiwork, and definitely a very good way to do something simple. But again, it's the little things that really make these Dokkan animations shine, that like you notice it in your subconscious, but you don't notice it in your conscious mind sometimes, right? Anyhow, we then cut to this shot, which was indeed in the original version, though it does look a little bit better in my eyes. We'll have to look at it when we look at the original animation here in a second. I never thought about how fire this transition is, by the way. The fact that the window on the tank pops off. How the glass doesn't break, but it pops off, I'm not really sure. But it pops off, that hits the camera, and then that's what they used as a transition into Cell coming up out of the water. Such a cool transition. Obviously, this shot looks fantastic. It looks right out of the movie. They definitely did a very good job with it. And then, of course, we get this shot, which is reused from the original one. Again, it still kind of looks like they made it a little bit better quality to me. I could definitely just be like seeing that because it's a new animation, but this shot looks fantastic. They definitely did a very, very good job with it, capturing Cell's craziness, right? As well, I love the way that the lights light up on his spots. I don't remember if the original one had that. We'll have to look at that in a second. Alright, so real quick, let's go ahead and take a look at the anime v Dokkan comparison here. Very, very good job, right? Obviously, for this shot, I think the thing that's the most interesting about everything, because everything else is pretty much just like solid, right? Of course, Dr. Hedo is hitting it here, but that wouldn't really make sense, right, for the context, so I think it's better that they just had the screen there. The interesting thing about this is, I guess, a couple of the angles, right? So they pan around him a little bit in the anime version, which is kind of interesting. And then here, it's because of the framing, right? We talk about this all the time on this series, where sometimes there's frames, or not frames, there's the way that the animation is framed is a little bit different in Dokkan compared to the movie, because the movie or the anime has like a horizontal, you know, obviously like display, whereas the movie is a vertical display. So it makes more sense for them to do it this way, I feel like. And the cool thing is, the implication of this is the fact that, right, obviously this is supposed to be like it's breaking around the entire thing and breaking out the back too. By having it be at this angle, it also keeps that implication that the water is breaking out the back. You just can't see it. And then, of course, as it comes to the front, you have that shot of the glass coming towards the screen. Definitely very, very good job. I like that little bit of perspective there. Of course, basically one for one, right? Essentially. This one, you can definitely tell it's a little bit more Dokkan asset-esque when it comes to Cell Max screaming for this one, rather than a little bit more that 3D model, but I still think it looks really good. And let's take a look then at that original intro animation, which was right here, right? So if we take a look at this, yeah, you can see that there's the water, right? There's the thing that spots out. That pretty much looks the same, and I'd say for the most part, this does look... I think it's exactly the same animation. I'm not going to hold you. I can't really see anything different. I know what they really updated was the 12 key. Obviously, they did add more to this, right? They added more to it in the beginning with Cell gaining the colors, right? So it's not exactly the same animation in that regard, but the stuff that is here is basically just copy-pasted into Cell Max's animations. Although, did he have... Wait. Oh, no, he does have the light of spots. Okay. I was going to say... Surely they must have not forgotten that, right? So it is kind of interesting, though. Obviously, again, they are a little bit different. I do think maybe... no, the color colors might be the same too, with like the little like hints of green shading that are kind of here, right? You can see there. It might be slightly different, but it is basically the same thing, right? Like it is a very, very similar animation if it's not exactly the same. It's hard to like tell because it's hard to know if they just quite literally ripped it. Although that does look like the same frame, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's probably exactly the same. But either way, though, I still think they did a good job. And again, I know that when this animation originally came out, people were like, dog, this is an intro. Like, literally, look at this and tell me that this is not an intro animation. Hydrate. From the very first time that we saw these assets, right? Like, there's no way that this wasn't going to end up being an intro. I will say, it is kind of crazy, though. The one thing I will admit about this intro that I want to pull up just the data for you on this is the fact that this came out so long ago now, right? Like, I know it doesn't feel like it, right? Because obviously, Superhero is only like a year or two old, something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head. But, right, this Cell Max event, right, when this originally came out, August 2022. Oh, yeah, because Superhero is going to be 2 years old this year, I believe, if memory serves correctly. But that means that this intro has been in the game, right, and they've just been cooking on this for just about 2 years. Which is kind of crazy. Obviously, give or take a couple months, but we're just, you know, like, kind of rounding up a little bit, or rounding down, whichever it would be. It's just kind of insane to me, the fact that this has been in the game for so long, and they just now decided to use it. It kind of goes to show that it really feels like that they had a lot more for Superhero planned, or they maybe wanted to do more, or wanted to do more stuff sooner, or something like that, but they just couldn't, or with the marketing, and obviously the whole thing happened with the Toei leak, where they couldn't do you know, superhero characters as soon as they wanted because the movie got delayed and all that stuff. So just speculation on my part for sure. You know, if maybe this guy was meant to potentially come out sooner, or if, like, you know, the planning for this unit already started a long time ago. I mean, it would seem like it to me, unless they literally, like, made this animation and then later on we're like, hold on guys, let's just use this for the intro. Like, I feel like that's a little silly, right? Like, surely when they were making this, they thought, okay, we're gonna make this animation and then, you know, later on it'll be less work for us because we'll already have basically the whole intro done for whenever we release a Cell Max character, right? Like, I think it's pretty clear that that was probably the way that they were thinking about it. But regardless, though, very interesting food for thought, I think. You can let me know what you think about that in the comments section below. So now we go to the 12-key super attack, which once again is the original one. However, they did improve upon it quite a bit. So it looks really good, by the way. I will say, like, this just basically looks like a more HD version of that original boss super attack. All of Cell's movements are pretty good, I gotta say. I think everything for the most part is pretty fluid. There's definitely a couple of things where there's like a little pose change here or there where I think they definitely could have improved upon it. The slam I really like. I think that they cooked on that, especially the movement here. This jump cut I think is okay. It's not too bad. When I watched it for the first time, it wasn't that jarring going from this to this, so I'd say it's alright. I will say here, though, I like that they have him be blurred, because obviously it's supposed to be like he's moving quickly, because even though Cell Max is a giant kaiju, obviously in the movie they talk about the fact that he's still really fast. But I think it's here, right, is kind of where the only point where I saw it, where it was like the punch kind of falls through and then it goes this way a little bit. Also could be a little bit of the stinky sprite kind of ruining the perspective a tad bit as well, but I just thought that the punch felt a little bit weird. And then when we get here, this was the real time. That one wasn't as bad. That one I think is more nitpicking a little bit. And hydrate, baby. So moving this back, right, obviously going from here to here, this I think is a little bit awkward. They maybe could have had something in between. I think it's the small little poses that are in this section was really the most jarring thing for me, right? That one, and I think that there's one more. Yeah, when my boy goes into the full dab out of nowhere, bro. Cell Max hitting it, bro. Dang. This is such a funny screenshot. I'm not going to hold you. I didn't know he was chill like that. But regardless, this to this is definitely a little bit jarring in terms of the posing, right? So I think that they could have maybe had a couple of frames in between that. But I do kind of like the movement here because then it's super quick to emphasize how fast he's moving and then whacking the enemy with the tail. I do like that they do have the tail also, you know, like blurry like this to obviously compensate for the fact that, you know, he's moving so fast. They have that little effect, and then obviously the enemy character gets smacked away. We get to this part where he grunts, squats down, and then lifts up. This is virtually the same as the original, so I'm not really going to be too, like, picky about it. I think they definitely could have still improved maybe this to this, although it's not the worst. I don't think it's as bad as going from that other pose to the straight up dab that he did a couple frames ago. But this part is definitely just taken from that original animation. I do like that they blur him though as he jumps, right? Very cool card art as well. I'm going to be curious to see what they do for the TUR and the SSR. I'm wondering if the SSR is just going to end up being like this art, right? Like the Boss Cell Max art. Or if it's going to end up being something original. I kind of hope it's something original, and to be fair, most of the time when it comes to these boss cards in Dokkan, they usually don't reuse the art for like an actual character, right? I mean, there's some cards that could have been units that, you know, have been there like in the game for so long. I mean, I guess it's kind of different, right? Because cards become boss cards, but I feel like a lot of the time when they're boss cards first, they don't usually become cards in the game, you know what I mean? Anyhow, moving on, definitely like this. It does kind of look like he has little tiny, whatever you call these, like his crown, right? But I think that's just because the angle, because he's tilting his head back, right? Because obviously here they look really long. But anyway, moving past the card art, right? We obviously have Piccolo fly over there, teleporting behind him, right? Or just moving super quickly. And then we have the punch thrown. Now, I feel like the animation may have gotten updated on this. Again, we're going to have to look at the full version of this, but I swear it looks a little bit better, right? Because this part was also in that original 12 key animation, and I swear that this looks better. Like, it could definitely be a little bit of tricks playing on you, because obviously when you see like a new version of something, even if it's the same, your mind tends to think it's better because it's newer. But I still think it looks alright, right? Nothing too crazy, but it's still clear that from the original, they definitely updated it. Actually, before we look at the anime versus Dokkan, let's see the original version of this, right? So we have him running, right? Obviously the dash forward, and then he hits... Okay, so interesting. That punch wasn't included, I don't think. Oh, yeah, and then he doesn't do the mouth? Huh, I completely forgot about the mouth beam, actually. Interesting. It is also interesting, too, because he's a lot brighter, right? Like, the assets for the character are a lot brighter in this animation, and I think it's just because, obviously, since this is a boss card and it's supposed to be a little bit more simple of an animation, this one, they definitely changed it quite a bit to obviously have it be more in tone with the scenery of the movie at this point, right? Like, I think the model for Cell Max looks a lot better. Not like that, it's not an actual model, technically like a 3D model, but you understand what I'm saying. It feels a lot more in tune, in fit with, you know, the actual like movies iconography, the movie's like the scene, I guess. You understand what I'm trying to say, like the area that it's happening in and the colors that are on screen on the movie, right? Like the visual aesthetic of the film, I think, is represented a lot better in this animation than in the boss card. You can tell a lot of the animation is a lot more fluid as well than that original. Yeah, I could still see that though when he changes poses there. I will say this is a little bit disappointing though. The only thing I think that they definitely could have just still included was the mouth beam from this, right? Because I do really like that. I think it feels a little bit more impactful than just the punch and then having the enemy fly into the ground, right? Having Cell Max fire that blast out of his mouth definitely felt a little bit more like oomph behind it, right? It definitely had a little bit more impact, I think, behind the attack than just having the character be punched away. I see. So it's the tail swipe that gets them away rather than that kind of close-up punch for him to then, you know, go behind the enemy and then throw them forward. Yeah, I do kind of wish they included the mouth beam, but it's okay. It's not the biggest deal, right? Like, I don't think it's a deal breaker by any means. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at then the anime versus Dokkan one to see. Yeah, they definitely... Okay, so they put together a bunch of different scenes. Interesting. Obviously, that's the card art. Yeah, so it's not like one fluid animation in terms of, like they didn't just take a scene from the movie and then basically recreate it in Dokkan, right? They took a couple different scenes from the movie. This shot of the blast being fired at him and him running, him zooming towards the camera. Obviously, this is later in the fight because half of his color is gone, right? And then, of course, right, this is from when he's fighting Orange Piccolo, right? When you have a little bit more of the orange scenery. I believe then this is more towards the beginning of the fight because you have the beams there and he still has his full color. Obviously, this is the card art once again. And then, of course, this is before even Orange Piccolo makes his debut in this fight specifically. I think it might actually happen right after this when he goes orange in this fight. But yeah, obviously, right, this is long before that happens because the entire gang is there and then Gohan takes the hit. So very interesting to see how they, you know, strung things together. Again, I think it's clear from watching these virtually side by side, right? Obviously, we're just kind of playing them and then rewatching them. But I think, you know, looking at them both this closely, it is very clear to see that they didn't just take the animation and reuse it, right? They retooled it a little bit. They made it a little bit better, right? They made it a little bit movie accurate. And I think if they're going to reuse animations like this, I think that that is absolutely the way to do it, right? Making it a little bit better, improving upon the original version, right? Making it a little bit more accurate to the source material, and overall just making it a more fluid and nice animation to look at. I think in this case, this is one time where I would say I think the reused animation is fine. Because I know that there's some instances in Dokkan where we see it and we're like, dog, come on, bro. But I feel like in this instance, I think they did a good enough job still varying it up while also improving upon it to make it still fit with the character, right? And I suppose at the end of the day, what this also does do is still leave a little bit more room for another Cell Max card in the future. I can't imagine that we'll probably get one a long time, especially considering outside of Dokkan superhero marketing is practically dead, but that's an entirely different conversation. So they probably won't be doing many superhero-themed cards in the near future, I would think. I think it may be a year or two before we even see another superhero-related card in Dokkan, unless it's like a free-to-play unit or something like that from like a story event. But hydrate. When it comes to like actual big boy cards like LRs and Dokkan Fest and stuff, I don't think we'll be getting anything, you know, for a while in Dokkan, unfortunately. But this does still leave room for more Cell Max stuff in the future because there's still stuff that they didn't use since they've reused the boss's animations. Now, let's go ahead and actually take a look at the 18 key super. We've talked about what was existing for long enough. Let's go ahead and talk about what's brand new. So, we start here, which is quite the entrance, if I do say so myself. We start here with Cell Max's big old face, you know, sitting right on the screen. I do like this shot quite a bit, I'm not going to lie. Even though it is basically just a PNG that's being shaken back and forth, I definitely think that they did a very good job with it. Nice little way to kind of introduce this again. Dokkan, we've said this time and time again on these animation analysis videos. It's like they're doing pseudo intro animations, right? This was like something they didn't have to include, considering the card art comes literally right after this scene. But I think it's cool that they included it from the perspective of obviously it just adds more to the card, right? So I think that they definitely, you know, did a good job there. And we have the beams of light shooting off of Cell Max's tail and fingers, which definitely looks really good, right? I think that the lighting was definitely something that they nailed on all of this, right? Obviously, even though there's light that's kind of pouring out of the little like holes and the spots, it doesn't get super bright until obviously the light actually bursts out, where the screen is a lot more brighter. Obviously, there's a lot more light reflecting on the hands and stuff like that. They definitely cooked on the lighting for this, and this shot looks fantastic. This also may be the thumbnail. Obviously, this is when all the different beams are coming out of Cell Max's spots, and this looks really good if I do say so myself. I don't really have any complaints with it. I think it looks fine. And this shot, oh, I'm so excited to talk about this. So this is obviously when all the beams are then flying out to basically destroy the surrounding area. This is going to be an underappreciated part of this animation for sure, because these beams look fantastic, all smacking into the ground and everything. And they did such a good job with the blasts actually impacting the ground, right? I think that these little blasts are super cool in the way that they actually hit the ground. And I have to show you, bro, they did such a good job with referencing this scene. So obviously this is also an AoE too, which is pretty cool. But if we go to this actual animation, let me show you this. So first of all, right, this part looks great, right, with obviously Max screaming. I will say, again, I think it's kind of funny because, of course, this is another instance of, like, the framing thing that I was talking about, where Dokkan's a vertical game, not a horizontal. So you basically just get to see Max's entire face, and in the movie, they have to pan up it because, obviously, it's so big, right? So I think that that's kind of funny that they then just basically give you the entire shot of him in the Dokkan version. But I think it works, right? This is an example where you know, I think that obviously the movie looks fantastic, and I think panning up makes it feel more dramatic, but it is cool that you kind of get this little bit of a unique angle with the Dokkan version, or a little bit of more unique, like, version of the shot. But anyway, so this, again, looks really, really good, obviously. We'll get that shot in about 5 seconds once again, but everything exploding looks pretty good. I will say, it is kind of interesting because I feel like one thing that I haven't really mentioned in this video yet, and one thing that I did want to talk about, is that in the original animations for the, like, superhero cards that we were getting, like that AGL teen, quote-unquote, Gohan, right, and a couple of the other original superhero cards, it feels like they tried to do a lot more closer to the CG style of animation. And then later on, they sort of did a more mixed of CG and Dokkan style, right? Where they kind of tried to combine the two art styles a little bit. And it's kind of interesting that it seems like that's what they've stuck with rather than trying to make it CG. Don't get me wrong, these animations definitely look a lot more CG-esque than stuff from, like, the Gogeta movie, the Broly movie, right? Like DBS Broly, right? Or, like, you know, the Buu Saga stuff, right? Obviously, it's clear to see that what they're going for is trying to mimic the CG style, but I think it's interesting that they sort of they strayed away a little bit from, like, basically only making it the CG art style, and they tried to implement a little bit more of that Dokkan art style into the animations. I think that that is kind of interesting. I don't really have one preference one way or the other, I guess. I don't really think that one is worse than the other. I mean, having it mimic the CG is really cool. However, then, in terms of gameplay, it definitely feels a little bit out of place at times because you're watching these animations that feel like, even though they may have a little bit of a different art style depending on saga, it kind of feels like that they flow a little bit better because they all still have a little bit of a consistent Dokkan art style to them. But then when you watch an animation from the superhero movie, it's like, whoa, hold on. This is way different, right? So I think it's almost a better thing in terms of that aspect of things. You know, that they then decided to kind of do a hybrid between CG and Dokkan. But I thought that that was something interesting to mention because especially when we get to this shot right here, right? I think this is a perfect example of, it's pretty clear that the assets look a little bit different than how they normally do, but it's definitely a lot more Dokkan-esque than it looks as, like, the CG model looks in the movie, right? So I think it's pretty clear to see the distinction between the two, especially with a shot like this. However, it is still really cool that they included this shot. I definitely like this one a lot. It is kind of disappointing, I will say. This is just another thing with Dokkan specifically, right? That's just kind of an unfortunate factor. Obviously, in this scene, the whole thing is that all the characters are trying to dodge the attacks. I don't know if, like, there would realistically, no, I actually do know. There's no way to, like, implement something like that in the game because obviously it would have to be like a bunch of enemy sprites or something, or it would be like if you were fighting multiple enemies, then animations would have to allocate for that and then include all of the multiple enemies in the animation. That would actually be sick. Hold on, that's a fire idea. I just thought of that off the dome. But regardless, right, it is a bit of a shame that you don't get all of the characters, right, in this scene in the Dokkan version. But again, it's like, what would they do? Also, the background is a little bit more dull than the superhero movie, but I think it's, like, again, not the worst thing. They do definitely do a good job of kind of capturing this, like, all these crazy beams flying out everywhere. And even so, right, even though it's not exactly the same, you can even see the direction of that beam that's in the very front kind of sweeps the same way in the Dokkan in the movie version, which is really cool. Now, here's the thing that I was so excited to talk about with the 18 key super. Ladies and gentlemen, they cooked here so hard. I didn't even pick up this connection when I first watched this, but this is so cool. So obviously you have all the beams flying out, right? That part's fine. It looks fantastic. But I didn't even realize that this is the scene where Pan flies. That's where they took the animation from. Also, the way the way Jian cuts this looks like Pan just gets destroyed. That's terrible. But regardless, though, right? Obviously, the beams hit, and you can see that it's when they impact the ground here is where they took the inspiration from the explosions from. And this, right, you can see when it kind of covers the screen with this purple, like, energy on the Dokkan side, right? You can see that, obviously, of course, there's a bunch of explosions. But what that's supposed to be, right, is at this very end here, when, you know, Pan is engulfed by the energy, and then, obviously, like, 2 seconds later, she flies out. But they use that to be the AoE animation. That's so cool. That's such an awesome way of doing things by, like, you know, taking little aspects from the movie and then implementing them into something to work well with the game's mechanics. That is so sick. As well, they also did a good job too. I have to see if I can find the frame. Basically, like, the background of, you know, before the character gets hit with the attack, you can see that it looks extremely similar to the energy that is there when Pan is running away from the explosion, right? So they cooked on this, right? I'm actually going to run this back in slow-mo because I think they did such a good job with this. This is easily going to be the most underrated part of the animation for sure, right? But by golly, it's hydrate or dihydrate. I think they did such a good job, right? Transforming, you know, this whole scene basically with all these explosions and stuff in the superhero movie into, you know, like Dokkan's animations and the way that the mechanics again of like AoEs work and stuff like that. I am very pleased that they did it this way. This is the type of stuff why I always love taking a look at animations like this, because it's always so interesting to see the way that they take the source material and implement it into the game in unique ways, right? It's like, this animation looks fantastic, right? Like from a visual standpoint already, but even seeing the technical aspects in that regard is really cool. That always makes me think more highly of these units and just Akatsuki as a company when I see them do stuff like this, because it's clear that there was some thought put into it. It's clear that they were creative in their endeavor. They didn't just like make it on the fly and be like, oh yeah, okay, we're just gonna give them an AoE and, you know, the blasts are just gonna hit the sprite and then it will just cut. No, they thought this through, which is really, really cool to see. But anyway, let's go ahead now and get to the final animation, which is the 18 key. Oh man, I'm so excited about this guy, man. I was already looking forward to Cellmax, but considering they did such a good job with him, I'm even more excited now, to be 100% honest with you. Alright, so Gohan Beast cameo, first of all, but also, funny enough, the dust cloud is in front of the sprite for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why, but hey, I ain't even gonna hold you. It's going to be there for like 0.2 seconds, so it's not like it really matters. It also may be a little bit more jarring because of the aura that Gohan has, so if a character doesn't have an aura, it may not be as noticeable there. But again, it's going to be there for like less than a second. Now, this part is really interesting. They like went really dark for this, right? They not like, you know, violent or anything. They went like literally, like it's hard to see my boy. But of course, this makes sense because not only do you have the glowing eyes, and I love the kind of like air effects coming off of his screen, trying to sort of emphasize this, right? This is how it looked in the movie. Let's just go to this shot real quick. If we go here, oh, it's also interesting because I guess it's the implication that it's taking from that part of when Gohan came down. But yeah, you can see that like even in the film, this is such a dark scene, right? Like the camera, why do I keep pausing it on the white flash? I was getting so unlucky. They definitely cooked with making it this dark in Dokkan. I almost feel like it's darker in Dokkan somehow. It's also interesting because I swear his tongue is not out in the Dokkan version, but it's honestly kind of hard to see where it looks like his tongue is out in the movie. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a tongue, all right? It's also the framing a little bit because, again, like we were talking about before, with the horizontal framing of the movie, right? They kind of have a little bit more focused on Cellmax's top half, whereas the bottom half or the bottom half. As the vertical one, excuse me, they have, you know, a little bit more of his body in frame. So I think that's also why it's like a little bit farther back, because they're, you know, able to kind of get a little bit more of his body in there. I think that's my only complaint with this scene. Like, they definitely didn't make it exactly to how, like, the, like, air effects are and whatever in the movie. But, I mean, again, I think as long as the representation is there, that's what matters. I mean, it's virtually 1-to-1, right? I think it would be nitpicking it to say otherwise. But I do think they could have made it, like, just a tad bit lighter. Just a tad bit. Like, it's not the worst, right? Like, you can still see it. But I just want it to be, like literally, like, one brightness lighter. Anyway, especially considering the fact that it's a little bit jarring that then here, Cell Max is so much brighter in this scene. Also, Gohan being here, this is so sick. But obviously, this is going to be different depending on the sprite that you're fighting. However, obviously the energy ball expands. I love the fact, by the way, that it gets green, the entire area, right? Yeah, obviously going from, let's get this specific frame here. Going from this shot to this shot, the landscape gets green. And you know what's the other thing I noticed? I didn't even notice this on the initial watch. You could see him kind of like pulsate a little bit, right? When the blast begins to go above his head, he moves up a little bit. And there's actually like a dust cloud on the ground that you can see that's coming off. It's supposed to be like the energy sort of emanating off of the ball, right? Of it initially being formed, right? Like it has that effect on the ground where it pushes the dust and debris like that. That is such a cool little detail. Again, it's stuff like this that really makes me love Dokkan animations and things. Because it's like, dude, I just want them to do stuff like this for everything. Like, I'm getting giddy over some dust particles, bro. Like, I'm a simple man to please, right? This is not that hard to do. And they're currently cooking, right? Alright, so we have the ball obviously increased above his head. I like the fact that, again, they have him kind of duck down a little bit and kneel a little bit as the blast gets a little bit higher, a little bit bigger, right? Obviously, they make it increase in size. But dude, this shot is so good. Oh my gosh. The effects on this are fire. I'm not gonna lie. So, very cool. The ball just expands, right? The boom, 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 just like in the movie. It doesn't like get bigger gradually. It just expands like, you know, in 3 chunks, and then it kind of collapses in on itself to condense the energy, right, within itself. They definitely cooked on this animation. I don't think I have a single complaint about this. Like, it looks so cool, especially the purple clouds. Those look insane throughout the entirety of this animation. I love how they also expand with the ball of energy expanding too, right? Like you can see them being pushed out basically as the energy ball gets bigger. And then of course they kind of get sucked back in a little bit with the energy, right? Super cool. Definitely love the way that this looks. This shot is awesome. So much to say about this. First of all, this looks like it's right out of the movie. Second of all, yeah, the twitching is fantastic, right? Obviously in this scene, because of course this is the part where Cell Max has already been beaten down and broken, right? Half of them would obviously be like decolored, but of course because they want to keep the Dokkan animations consistent, if a character takes like considerable battle damage, unless it's part of the card somehow, they don't like include it in that way, right? So that's why he's twitching though, because obviously in this scene, this is like his last stand basically. So very, very cool that they included that. And the energy looks fantastic. I know this was something that people were really hoping that Dokkan would cook on, and they definitely did a good job. I would say that the energy ball here looks really, really cool. Now, I do want to talk about, actually, before I kind of analyze the rest of like the specifics with the animation, I do want to just kind of let it play out with this part of him throwing the ball, and then we'll talk about like the actual animation that is at play here. Because what's really interesting about this, right, is that this is another instance like we've talked about before. Oh, and then we'll also talk about the scene that comes after this, because it's a little weird. But also, I have to mention, I love the detail that the blast is Cell Max color. That's so cool. It's like so unnecessary, but so awesome. Regardless, though, again, it's those little things, right? what's really cool about this animation is that in the movie, of course, this attack does not actually go through, right? When we watch this, right, first of all, again, movie accuracy on point, right? Like, everything at play here is so good. The only thing that I guess kind of stinks a little bit is they didn't have as much of, like, the energy absorbing back into the blast effects there. They kind of did, but in the movie it looks a little bit better, but I mean, obviously, it's a high-budget movie. So again, they have Cell tweaking out there. And then, of course, right, the energy, I don't think that you obviously see in this video, but I believe in the movie you do actually see, like, the middle of the ball with that green energy. You can kind of see the bottom of it there on the anime version. But it also is a little bit easier for Dokkan to show because, again, the vertical framing of the shot. But what's really interesting about this, again, is that, of course, he throws the ball and it gets destroyed, right? We'll talk about this in a second. That's a little bit of a weird one. But obviously, when he throws the attack, right, which I didn't even notice that it changed color to this when it was in the movie, so that's pretty cool, honestly, that they still kept that there. Of course, in the film, it gets destroyed by the special beam cannon, right? So, they had to do something to basically make it be like an actual attack, right, in the game, which is why they obviously did this with the Cell Max, like, mushroom cloud thing here. I'm obviously basically just taking from the same scene where the energy is sucked back in. I think that that's a really good way to do it, because I think that, again, it's always really cool when Dokkan does these, like, almost like what if, because this is basically like what if Cell Max won, or what if his attack landed, I guess maybe would be more apt. But it's cool because obviously they kind of have to, you know, make up a little bit of stuff, do a little bit of Dokkan Original, just a slight bit. But it's cool whenever they do this type of thing to see what they come up with, and I think that this is definitely a very good way to do it. Now, what else is really awesome about this shot? So let's go back and talk about the actual animation of this. I will say it is a little bit jarring going from like the movie quality to a little bit more like you can tell that this is a Dokkan asset. It doesn't look bad by any means. It's just that change of art style that I think is a little bit jarring. However, the boy does look very menacing here. I ain't gonna hold you. My boy looks crazy right here. For some reason, the first time I saw this, I thought of Batman, but maybe it's just because the eyes and Cell's like crown, whatever that would technically be called, kind of reminds you of Batman's ears on the cowl, or the bat ears on the cowl, I guess, not Bruce Wayne's actual ears. But anyway, regardless though, looks fantastic, right? I definitely like the way that this turned out. And then of course you have him change expression. I do kind of wish that this was a little bit more like, I don't know, animated, I guess, just in the expression changing from this to this, especially considering the colors, right? Because it's so dark with the shadows, it would have benefited a lot more if he would have raised his head and opened his mouth gradually into this shot, rather than him being like this, right? Also, if you look up at the top left corner of this screen, you can see that the shoulder, not the shoulder, the wrist piece also moves up, which is a little bit weird. I think it might just be a little bit of a kind of an optical illusion. I mean, obviously it is there, but I don't think that that's what's supposed to be happening, right? Also, Cell looks like an old man in this shot. It's definitely just the, or like a corpse or something. Like, he looks like a zombie. I think it might just be because of the fact that the lighting and the shading is this way. It definitely does look a little bit off, though, going from this to this. However, I don't think it's the worst. Again, it's just something that I wanted to point out. But as we go from this, I really like the way that this is executed. So first of all, this is really cool. And the movement on Cell Max himself, right? Obviously, after the camera backs up a little bit, right? Here, right? Obviously, it is stable. But, you know, when we go after this section, we have some very nice fluid movement on him, like twisting his legs and then throwing the ball down, which is awesome. And I didn't even really realize this. I was thinking like, oh, this is a pretty cool Dokkan original animation for this. Because I was thinking like, wait a minute, where does this exactly come from? Because obviously the ball doesn't connect. If we go back and look, this is actually the part where Piccolo has him in the hold. And he still does throw the ball in the same manner, right? As you can see, right? He still does throw the ball of energy like this in the film. It just feels a little bit different because obviously Piccolo's trying to choke him out in the movie, right? So, very, very good way of doing this, right? I think that they cooked on, again, taking this scene that's like a little bit different and not exactly like this, and then changing it into something more. You can also tell, too, that the superhero movie had a better transition with the face, right? Because obviously, again, he's like grunting or his teeth are clenched. But then his mouth gradually opens like this, right? And then they transition into this shot here, you know, in Dokkan, right? So I think that they definitely should have had him just kind of slowly open his mouth like he did in the movie. But again, it's not like the worst thing in the world, right? It's definitely not great, but it could be worse for sure. So obviously the blast is thrown. It definitely looks better in the movie. I still think they did a good job capturing the effects for the most part, right? It's a good representation of what's in the film, and I think that's what's most important when it comes to these Dokkan animations. As long as they represent it well, I think that that's what's important. Also, you're talking about like a multi-million dollar... Well, I mean, let's not get into that argument. I was going to say, you're talking about a multi-million dollar movie compared to Dokkan, which is a multi-billion dollar game. But what I mean is that obviously the budget that goes into a full-length feature anime film is not the same budget that goes into one specific Dokkan animation, right? Obviously, that's what I mean in specific. So, of course, you know, with that, like, price discrepancy is a weird way to describe it, but I guess so. You know, with the difference in the pricing there, and well, maybe it's more like money put in. You understand what I'm trying to say. It's clear that obviously it's not going to be exactly like the movie, and not to mention, right, it is Dokkan. They obviously want to keep it a little bit to the Dokkan style, but once again, I still think that it's a good representation of what's in the movie, right? It gets the job done, is what I'm trying to say. Now, here's what's really interesting. So obviously the Cell Max like blast explosion looks really good, right? There's no denying that I think they definitely did a very good job with this, right? Because they had to make this up because obviously it doesn't happen in the movie. But here's where the transition gets really weird. So starting from this shot right here, you have this impact frame, right? And then you have the exploded planet with all the lights. And then you have it transition into this right here, which is a planet exploding. And I believe this is from Kid Boo's attack. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me in the comments on that. But the weird thing is, this is like literally from DBZ, right? Like, obviously, this is from Dragon Ball Z. I'm wondering if they specifically chose this just because the colors match Cell Max with the explosion a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the reason why they chose this. But I will say, this explosion in Dokkan is so jarring because, again, we've been talking about throughout the entire time, right? You're so used to seeing this, like, combination of the superhero and Dokkan, like, style, right, of the movie. Then when it cuts to straight DBZ art style in the Dokkan version, it's so jarring. It's like, whoa, where did this come from? The first time I saw it, I honestly thought it was a mistake. Like, I thought the video on Twitter was, like, wrong, or, like, they included an animation from something else. But no, this is how it's supposed to be. They just took it from this shot from Dragon Ball Z. So I will say, that is probably the biggest L in these animations for me, because the explosion, like, makes sense enough in the way that, you know, the blast hits the planet, and then of course the planet's gonna explode because a giant blast of energy is hitting it. But it really does feel like to me that it doesn't really connect well with the rest of the animations. It feels extremely out of place to me personally. So with that being said, I do think that that's probably my least favorite thing about it, ironically enough, the very end, because to me it quite literally looks like you were watching footage from Superhero and then they cut to Dragon Ball Z, right? And obviously for an animation that's supposed to flow into each other, that's a bit of a yikes. I ain't gonna hold you. But again, it's not the worst thing. It could definitely be worse. And if anything, right, the obvious advantage of it is that the animation that is there, even though the art style change is jarring, the actual animation itself looks fine, right? Like, I don't think that there's anything too crazy with it. It does have a little bit of that fade, but obviously that's because it's supposed to be like the anime effect, right, that is taking place on the screen. So I don't really think that it's too bad, right? Like, I think that the animation itself looks good. It's just jarring because, to me, it's like a big art style change. But again, most people may not even notice. Obviously, if you're a Dokkan analyst like me, right? Of course, these are the type of little things that you may notice. But of course, for just the general viewer, it might not even be that obvious to them. Now, with all that being said, that is all of the boys' animations, obviously. I think that they definitely cooked on this guy. I am very, very satisfied personally with how the animations for this man turned out. Once again, I was kind of under the assumption that they were probably going to reuse these animations, because even when we saw this boss card from the get-go, like, we saw it, and I think everybody in the community, conglomerately, collaboratively, whatever, right? Like, everybody was like, yeah, that's an intro, right? Like, there's no way that that's not an intro animation. And even when looking at the boss card, I was like, yo, this animation is so short and sweet for the actual super. It's perfect for a 12 key for an LR, and that is, of course, what it ended up being. So my guesses were correct, not like it was any incredible guess or anything like that. I mean, you know, probably more obvious of a guess than some other, you know, mental gymnastics we do to guess some stuff that ends up happening in Dokkan. But regardless, though, I'm really pleased with this guy. I think that they did a good job, even though they reused stuff. It's good to see that they retooled a little bit of it, right? Improved upon it, added some extra things, definitely made it a little bit more movie accurate, made it look a lot better. And it doesn't necessarily just feel like, oh, this is just a boss cell card, right? Like, you know, reused. It feels like that it's actually just part of LR Cell Max, right? The 18 key is fantastic, right? I think they definitely did a very good job with it. I'm very impressed with the way that they incorporated the whole scene with Pan running away. I think they did a great job of turning that into the AoE with the game's mechanics. And, of course, the active skill is so good, right? They did such a good job getting the crazed side of Cell Max, right? They did a great job with the lighting and the energy effects throughout, right? I think that they did a fantastic job really making the scene feel very impactful with Cell Max, you know, landing the blast on the planet. And I think they did a good job with the blast. I'm pretty sure every time I'm watching this now, I honestly think they just chose this specific blast because A, the planet blows up, and B, like, the colors are just Cell Max colors for this explosion. I think that that's literally the reason why they picked this, which is kind of funny, but hey, it works, right? So let me know what you think about the boy in the comment section below. Let me know if you are going to be summoning. I will be summoning until I get him, right? Like, I am not leaving this unit behind. I'm a huge superhero head, so obviously anything superhero related in Dokkan, I absolutely need to get it. But let me know if you're excited for LR Cell Max in the comment section below. It seems like a lot of people in the community are, so it's really awesome to see everybody riling up for superhero. It's always good to see a little bit of superhero love. And with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.